Welcome, Gunrunner.
Last month I did a video looking at cancelled console expansions that went down really well, and that got me thinking about all sorts of other add-ons for home consoles that would be interesting to talk about in a story of video. Then my thoughts led on to controllers in particular, and even more specifically the really weird ones that you can't quite believe were considered, let alone produced. From here I made a list of potential candidates, and then whittled that down to 5 that are simply so crazy you'd think I'd made them up. You probably won't be surprised to learn that the vast majority of these originated in the early 80s, as this was the biggest period of innovation in the console industry, when companies were still trying to figure out what worked and what didn't, especially when it comes to controllers. We saw all sorts of designs that were meant to make games play better or add important advancements, but ended up being a massively backward step. Atari 5200 controller. In the end, the simplicity of joysticks and joypads came back to the fore, and people stopped trying to mess with a winning concept. As the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So let's get on with looking at these crazy controllers, joystick jokes and pants pads that ruined the gaming experience for everyone who bought them back in the day.
Atari, exploring new frontiers of technology with innovations that excite consumers and stimulate sales. Get ready for the amazing Atari Mindlink, an exciting and unusual new way to operate Atari home computers. It works on the electrical impulses from the muscles in your forehead. The state of the art for the states of your mind.
That's crazy!
Let's start off with one that was never released, but has become pretty famous despite of this, because it's just so ludicrous that you struggle to believe that such a thing was ever conceptualised. First shown by Atari at the 1983 CES show, it was initially promoted as a controller that could read your mind. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Of course, this was absolute bunkum, and the Mindlink could do no such thing. It just gave the rather clever impression that it did, and in actual fact this headband used a series of sensors to read the movements of your forehead. So for example, raising your left eyebrow could be used to perform a specific action. Initially promoted as an add-on for the Atari 2600, with the promise of versions for the Atari 8-bit computers and upcoming Atari 7800 arriving at a later date. The Mindlink was also shown with 3 games that were developed specifically for the controller. The first and by far the best of these was Bionic Breakthrough, which was a new version of Breakout where you controlled the paddle with your head. However, during the show many people complained that it gave them headaches once the pace stepped up, although they did also remark that the controller itself worked surprisingly well. The 2 other titles, Telepathy and Mindlink, were designed for 2 players and based around the claimed ESP aspect of the product, with you trying to do all sorts of things like guess the playing cards. These were received far less favourably and very much forced Atari to go back to the drawing board. They soon struggled with ways to make the Mindlink more exciting, and that, along with the repeated complaints of headaches from testers, caused Atari to cancel it completely during the 1984 product review carried out by new CEO James Morgan, who was keen to cut costs and focus on key brands.
That's crazy!
Now we've had one of the more well-known examples, let's switch things up with a really obscure one, shall we? Because I'm betting that most of you have never even seen a QuickShot 9 before, let alone used one. And there's a good reason for that, because this thing was absolutely awful. Also known as the QuickShot Ball, it was released by American company Spectra Video in 1984 and also licensed to several European manufacturers such as Bondwell and Sigma, much like their other joysticks. Now I want you to take a good look at this thing for a minute, a really good look, and then tell me what kind of controller this is. I bet you all thought it was a trackball, right? A very cool and futuristic looking trackball at that, eh? Totally wrong. The QuickShot 9 is actually an incredibly cumbersome joypad of sorts. You put your hand on the huge plastic dome and then simply rock it into the direction you want. Doesn't sound so good now, does it? I got one in a big job lot of stuff some years ago and later sold it, but I wish I still had it, because then I could make a video on it and demonstrate just how awful it is. Perhaps I need to get another one. Being so big, it's slow to use, awkward to hold, although it did come with rubber suction cups on the bottom so you could stick it to your desk, and just totally impractical. Quickshot tried to flog these things for many years. It even created adapted versions for computers like the MSX to try and shift more of them, but by the late 80s they had totally disappeared from their advertised lineup. Not to say that Quickshot learned from this mistake though, as they went on to create quite a few more weird and wonderful controllers, like this strange joypad thing, and the QS Navigator Flight Control too.
That's crazy!
I'd say the Atari Puffer is my favourite of all the controllers on this list, and it's probably the most obscure one on this list too. And if you're wondering why you've never heard of it, that's probably because it was never released either, for reasons I'll go into, but I need to tell you all about what Project Puffer was first, so it all makes sense. To put it in the most simple terms, Puffer was basically an exercise bike that connected to your Atari 5200 Super System console via the controller port and allowed you to combine two of your favourite hobbies, fitness and video games. It was supposed to come in 4 different versions, 2 for the home and 2 for commercial use. The 2 home versions would be a complete bike that came fitted with custom 5200 controllers instead of handlebars, and a special add-on that could be fitted to most existing exercise bikes. This included a special sensor that would be placed over the wheel to track how fast you were moving. As well as the hand controls, there would also be a heart monitor to stop you from overdoing it. Obviously the bike would need to be placed in front of a TV and your 5200 console. 2 games were being worked on at Atari for the home version called Jungle Cruise and Tumbleweeds. The first of these was the more exciting game and was designed so it could be used with the standard 5200 controller too. Although it looks a bit like River Raid, it wasn't so much about shooting and more about rescuing people stranded on the river whilst avoiding rocks and snapping gators. Pedalling on the bike would make you row the boat, which reportedly worked very well. Sadly, no prototype of this game has ever been found, even though it was demonstrated to the press. Tumbleweeds was a very different affair where you simply rode a bike through the desert avoiding cacti and tumbleweeds that blew into your path, hence the name. An early prototype of this has been found, but it doesn't look very exciting. Atari also said that the existing versions of both Ms. Pac-Man and Pole Position had also been adapted to work with the Puffer too. The 2 commercial versions of the Puffer were simple exercise bikes that came fitted with their own screen, heart monitor and built-in 5200 console, where you simply watched yourself riding along a street or through the countryside, with no need to actually play a game while you exercised. This version was mainly aimed at leisure centres and gyms. Then there was a slightly more advanced version of the same bike aimed at arcades. This one removed the heart monitor and put back the more advanced controls and was more focused on playing the game rather than getting a workout. What is especially interesting about this is that the first game being designed for the arcade Puffer was called Chase, and saw you riding through a rough neighbourhood being chased and attacked by all the local hooligans. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? It should do, because after the Puffer was cancelled, the concept was evolved further to create Paperboy. So why was the Puffer not released then? Well, it was partly due to the declining North American video game market caused by the crash, which initially saw it put on hold, and then it was cancelled completely when Jack Tramiel took over Atari's consumer division and immediately discontinued the 5200 console and all associated products.
That's crazy!
Released in 1981, Datasoft's Lestick was the first ever motion sensitive joystick, 25 years before the Wii arrived on the scene. Initially advertised as an add-on for the Atari 2600 and Atari 8-bit, with Commodore 64 focused marketing coming later, it was promoted as a replacement for your existing joystick that would offer much faster and more free controls. The last part of this being aimed at the Atari 8-bit computers in particular, and games like Star Raiders, where you needed to use keyboard controls as well as the joystick, as the stick would leave one hand free. In fact, Datasoft, yes, the same Datasoft who released games like Bruce Lee and the Goonies, actually developed several software packages for the Atari 8-bit to make specific use of Lestick, and even included an Atari Basic routine in the manual to help you get the most of it. They certainly didn't scrimp on the marketing and released the product in Europe as well as North America. Now, ignoring the rather amusing design of Lestick for a moment, oi, you! Stop laughing at the back and pay attention please. Its design was based around a rather unique mercury switch. Squeezing the stick would set the vertical axis centre, and the mercury orientation sensor provided the directional signals. Sounds pretty clever, right? Well, yeah, I suppose it is, but the big problem was that it didn't really work very well at all. The stick was slow to respond, totally imprecise, and made you look like an idiot holding a big black dildo. There, I said it. It also didn't help that it was really expensive too, much more so than a regular joystick that was much more user friendly. After failing to offload their huge inventory of unsold Lesticks to unsuspecting home computer users in the booming European market, Datasoft gave up on it completely and it was soon forgotten about.
That's crazy!
I'm betting that when you saw the title of this video, this was the first controller you thought of, because the Sega Activator is easily the most high profile and well known entry on this list, and that's why I saved it until last. Released in 1983 to a huge amount of fanfare, Sega backed the Activator with a big advertising budget and produced a number of very misleading adverts to help promote the device. And the fact they had to mislead people to sell the thing tells you everything you need to know about it, quite honestly. So why misleading? Well, in many of the press images and adverts, Sega showed people performing a range of martial arts moves inside a big black octagon that is the Activator. Then on the TV in front of them you would see the character doing the exact same move. No wonder there was so much initial excitement about this add-on. Only that wasn't how it worked at all, not even close, because the Activator was a lot more limited than Sega led people to believe. You see, the octagon was made up of sensors that represented each of the directions on the regular 3-button Mega Drive joypad and the 4 buttons, A, B, C and Start, hence why it was an octagon, to match the 8 functions needed to play a game. To perform an action you simply had to interrupt the infrared beam, be it with your hand or foot. So I suppose it was very possible to perform kicks and punches to activate moves, but you'd have to do it really slowly and in a very specific way to block the correct sensor. Because of this design, it meant that the Activator was compatible with any existing Mega Drive title. However, a small number of games were partially designed for use with the Activator and so were specifically labelled as being activated. These were Best of the Best Championship Karate, Eternal Champions, Greatest Heavyweights and Streets of Rage 3. In addition, Sega also promoted support for Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter 2 and Streets of Rage 2. The Mega Drive and Sega 32X versions of Mortal Kombat 2 also mention the Activator specifically by name, but the control scheme is identical to that of the standard 3-button controller. So the first problem with the Activator was that it was missold and didn't work as suggested, but this was far from the only issue, as it was also far too expensive, launching at just shy of $80, and by far the biggest issue of all was that it just didn't work very well. Every movement had to be really accurate and so stopped any kind of fluidity, especially when you also had to remember which part of the octagon to activate. It's very easy to see why this horrible idea failed.
First of all, we want to say congratulations. You have in your possession the Sega Activator, the ultimate full-body game controller. Feel free to consider yourself a pioneer on the interactive frontier.
Okay, I will. Gotta go.
Now, take a look at your fingers. Identify the ones we like to call thumbs. Pat them on the back if you can find their backs, and thank them. Up until now, they've been doing all the work, but that's about to change. Try practicing with a game you already know. Streets of Rage 2 works great in the Activator. In fact, the Activator plays all of your old Genesis games, plus new titles specially activated for full-body action. Just be sure to check the game manuals for the special Activator instructions. Discover a new world of moves and combinations that simply aren't possible with normal controllers. You'll be surprised how quickly your body catches on. The Activator lets you be creative. Unleash that inner warrior. Better yet, unleash 2 inner warriors by going head-to-head with another Activator. There's never been anything like this. Jump into the action with the Activator, the next level of interactive gameplay from, who do you think?
Sega!
And that rounds up my look at 5 crazy console controllers. Can you think of any other strange control methods that could have qualified for this video? Or did you own one of these back in the day and want to share your experiences? As always, I love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comment section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons to continue to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Grady Haynes, Mitchell Valentino, Seth A. Robinson, Carl Olsen, Dos Gamerman, Sonic Mania 999, Paul Daniel, Andrew McKay, Retro Resolution, Matt Standish, James Taylor, Trolldoor the Burninator, Mins, 8-Bit Guy, Luke MC, Ben P. Stein, Tavi Kitsune, and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.